All right, welcome everybody. We are so happy to have you here. We are going to be diving into enterprise service management today, and we're going to use this opportunity to welcome someone who has a lot of experience with deploying enterprise service management. And that is Jonathan Vorndren from Casino, Arizona. So, Jonathan, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And I think it's always great to hear from a practitioner as to some of the lessons learned, the drivers, the process they went through. My name's Andrew Graff. I lead product here at Team Dynamics. And you think about IT service management, which I think all of us here are probably practitioners of some sort. And the same types of workflows, forms, the way we use AI is really applicable to lots of different functions: HR, legal, procurement, marketing, facilities, right? A lot of these organizations or different parts of the organizations have needs similar to IT, but sometimes not the know-how or tools. So what's really exciting about enterprise service management is it brings those types of capabilities to those organizations in a way that makes sense to them or to those different areas. So just a quick overview of Team Dynamics before we get started, if you're not familiar. So we are a service management platform, a no-code, cloud-based application that supports full range of ITSM capabilities, but also enterprise service management. And so when you think about IT service management, obviously you're thinking about people having issues with Wi-Fi, with printers, with permissions, et cetera. But if we think about some of those other use cases, think about procurement for contract review or terms and conditions references, legal document reviews, right? Marketing, a need for some sort of promotional materials, scheduling conferences, things like that. So there's lots of needs and space for these types of things. So now, with that preamble over, let's sort of dive into Casino, Arizona's story. So again, welcome, Jonathan. The enterprise service management story is really impressive at Casino, Arizona. They're using it across the organization. They're using it in what they call environmental services, which is housekeeping, but also IT, AV, the way space is set up, physical security, the project management office. We do offer project portfolio management capabilities within our work management suite, but facilities, sales, you name it. So when you're thinking about Casino, Arizona, many of you may have been there, but they employ about 3,500 people across resort properties. They did come off of another system that had some limitations, which Jonathan will talk about. But Jonathan, can you talk a little bit about why you sought to change platforms? What did you see as an opportunity, and what was the catalyst for deciding, hey, we really need to invest in a new platform for enterprise service management?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest drivers for us was we wanted something that would work for a couple different departments, a couple different opportunities, something that's easy to configure and manage with that expansion. I know IT is often looked at like a cost center, so we wanted to make sure that the tool that we purchased was going to work for a variety of different use cases in our environment. So with that, we want to look for something that was easy to administer. Again, be able to reach out to a couple different teams, but we didn't want to have IT constantly managing, the 6 different applications for each different segment. We wanted one kind of one-stop shop for all of our solutions, and that way IT was informed and able to configure, and we were able to kind of guide our teams to the finish line for their items. So with that, we've had great success in the implementation that we've had here. Very positive results with IT, very positive results with all the other departments that we've deployed with. Some things that we'll cover later on. We've had approval process issues before we went to Team Dynamics. So everyone likes to spend money and they like to have IT spend money for them. They want 4 screens and a MacBook Pro and a bunch of different items. In the past, it was all wet signatures to make sure that your manager approved you spending $10,000 in computer equipment. Team Dynamics allowed us to streamline that process, have email approvals, or be able to have the managers approve via their email by tapping a link in the approval structure. So we've cut down on our approval process from, at times weeks or multiple days to sometimes less than an hour, as long as the communication is there. So It's really been able to provide the teams the ability to do their job more successfully, and really streamline all of our processes internally.
When when you were thinking about this switch, what were you using prior to switching to Team Dynamics?
Yeah, so we had a hodgepodge. We had in IT, we had Heat, and then we moved to Microsoft CRM. Our facilities team was using Maximo. Our badge requests were using a custom application that was housed on SharePoint. Food and beverage didn't really have a process, maybe some forms, some napkin math and signatures as well. So quite a few different applications.
And how did you get started? So you decide you're going to make the switch, right, to role in enterprise service manager. Can you talk a little bit about both the process, how you got started? So the business processes, what were the first steps you took to start on this enterprise service management journey, and then the technology as well. What were the steps you took once you made that decision and started rolling out?
Sure. Initially, we started an RFP. Wanted to make sure that we got requirements from all of the teams that we thought would be beneficial in getting an ESM solution. So making sure that we looked at all of those requirements. And then once we decided on Team Dynamics, our first implementation was IT. I think that allowed the team to get really familiar with all of the intricacies. It allowed us to set up custom attributes and workflows and really make sure we understood the platform so that we could do better at selling it to the other business groups that we decided to deploy with. So we were able to track SLAs, make sure that we could show them time reporting, the ease of use on a tablet. And so as we kind of deployed, or as we were about 60% of the way with IT, we started going into the next department, which was facilities, and making sure that we used some of our Team Dynamics team members to kind of help bridge that gap for facilities. So we had an excellent implementation team that kind of assisted with some of the workflow building and some of the process design from the experience that they've had with Team Dynamics, as well as some of the webinars that we attended, and also the knowledge base that's on the Team Dynamics site was very helpful. Once we did facilities and got them in place, we went to environmental services, and then security, food and beverage, purchasing. We're looking at expanding. HR is a potential next step. We're doing an HCM migration this next fiscal year, so we want to kind of not overwhelm them too much, and then potentially slots in some other areas. So really, as you learn the product, you start to figure out ways or think of different ways that it would benefit other departments in the enterprise, and then sell it to them. I mean, you know all about the application once you've built it, so it's easy to configure something that they could use.
So, sometimes different parts of organizations can be apprehensive or have negative perceptions of switching. Why did you start with facilities? And did you have to overcome any cultural barriers or organizational change management issues? And if so, how did you do that? Because I think that's always one of the most important things with any of these types of initiatives.
Absolutely. No disrespect to anybody in facilities, but they were hired to be in facilities. They don't want to work tickets. They don't want to work on paperwork. They want to do their job, clock out, go home, and enjoy the rest of their day. So that was certainly a barrier that we had to overcome. But the ease of use with tablets, allowing them to have an iPad at their hands, which also allowed them the flexibility in our sales pitch was, you also have an iPad that can show you a YouTube tutorial, or you can check your email or check in with home base, make sure you're kind of staying in touch with everything. So it was really selling the entire package of mobility with this platform, which we didn't have previously, with the flexibility of most of our team now is just clicking, mark complete on a task. So there's not too much work for our end users and a facilities framework. You'll see later on we have a workflow that's pretty robust. And for the most part, they're just clicking mark complete as they check each box. So did you turn the power off? Did you make sure that you communicated that you turned the power off? Those kind of things. So making it as easy as possible, making it kind of a one touch for them really helped sell it for most of our enterprise users.
Oh, that's great. And I forgot to tell everyone this is going to be interactive, and there's two ways we're going to interact. The first is we're going to have a series of polls to help us gauge where you are in your journey, ask questions that might help me guide some of the questioning to help you. And then the second is there is a Q&A area within Zoom as well. So if you have questions along the way at the end, I'll be helping make sure that we get those answered by Jonathan or us if that's more appropriate for the answer. So the first question we have is, where are you in your enterprise service management journey? Everywhere from we haven't started to we have enterprise service management all over the place, right? We are experts at it. We know how to roll it out. We know how to support those users and those groups. So just take a minute and fill this out, and this will give us a little bearing on where you all are in your journey. I'm going to keep it open here for a couple more seconds. So if you could click, that would be great. We're getting good participation, so appreciate that. So I'm gonna end the poll. It doesn't look like the numbers are changing too much at this point. So it looks like the largest cohort is between 1 and 2 groups. And then the others, aside from we are ESM gurus, which that's almost a trick question. I don't think anyone can be a guru at anything. When it comes to service management, there's always room to improve. So I think that's good. It seems like we have an honest group. So, Jonathan, from your experience, do these results surprise you?
A little bit. I'm surprised that a lot of folks have kind of expanded their ESM role. I think from an IT standpoint, we're used to thinking about IT things and focusing on ourselves. So it's really kind of great to see that this tool is being used as we are in multiple facets of the enterprise.
Yeah, I think what I like to see here is that you have some people who I would say are excelling at enterprise service management with 5+ groups, but there's a lot of people here who probably will get a lot of benefit as well from your lessons learned and observations, right? And how did we do this? Where, knowing what you know now, what would we do? What would you do differently? Those types of things. So really excellent. So the when we think about enterprise service management, these are a couple examples of non-IT use cases that we see pretty regularly. So onboarding, offboarding, and team members is one of the biggest ones, right? That's lots of moving parts, complicated, error prone, etc. And then we have a lot of people doing QA or in manufacturing facilities, spill or accident reporting. I mean, you think all of these types of things that need to be documented and piped through a workflow for review. It's kind of a generic application of these types of technologies and tools. So there's a lot we can do. Now, if we think about the must-haves, right? What you see here are some of the must-haves that we see in our customers. But Jonathan, what was the sort of keynote or keystone must-have when you were looking at a system? What was the most important component or most important attribute?
Scalability is one of them. Something that can grow with us as an enterprise. I think all of us realize that, the job that you started versus the job that you do today is probably a little different, more roles and responsibilities and more things. But the other thing is the ability for it to be easy to administer. So we have facilities, we allow them to kind of have enough administrative permissions to do some basic tweaks and changes to their workflows and forms, but they're not impacting other departments. So they really have their own playground. They have their own sandbox that they're able to kind of poke around at, make some administrative changes, adapt things to their changing workflows or changing requests. But they're not going to impact other departments. And then from an IT standpoint, we do have the capability of impacting the entire enterprise by rolling out, global changes. So to be able to set up permissions for different usage areas was paramount to us. So like I said, not total rights, but some rights. And then, we also needed reporting. We needed to be able to get reporting on the fly for something that might be very focused or maybe a global change. How many tickets are we getting this month, or how many tickets related to this specific application? So the ability to create ad hoc reporting with a custom view and then turn those into dashboards has been outrageously valuable to us. We created a CIO dashboard, so at a snapshot, he can see every single team that reports to him, how many tickets are coming in, stale tickets, how long tickets are taking, average workflow of tickets, those kind of things. And then the customer portal was big. Being able to customize the customer portal, making sure that we were able to create forms that were useful for not only ourselves, but the end user, making sure that we didn't give them analysis paralysis. You can't ask too many questions or else they're not going to use it. They're going to call you on the phone and just say, figure it out. So making sure that those questions were beneficial to the customers for inputting, as well as making sure they were beneficial to whomever department was receiving that information to be able to act on it without having to make 5 or 6 phone calls and go back and forth and set up a meeting, which we all kind of dread, but making sure that all of that information was there. So that was great, and really instrumental to us. We now have a knowledge base that's built into our ticketing platform instead of, you know, post-it notes and scribble notes and Word documents saved and, you know, the abyss of all of our shared drives. We have a knowledge base, so our customers have a self-service platform where they can ask questions to it based on keywords and might get the answer that they look for before submitting a ticket. And that's been helpful. We have a lot of job aids on mobility and setting up email on your phone, those kind of things that typically the help desk would have to field. Now there's a PDF sitting on a knowledge base. They search mobile and they get what they need. So really all of those things were kind of instrumental for our success. I wanted to show you kind of how specific and how flexible the system can be. Speaking of facilities and some of our workflows, this is just one of our workflows. We have 147 different workflows in our environment right now. I know it's hard to read. We'll give you a blown up view here in the next slide, but this is just an example of how complex some of the workflows can be. So this could be, you know, an oil change for a truck. You want to make sure that you register the odometer, you buy the filter, you have the oil, you have everything you need. And then there's action items. You know, did you check window washer fluid? Did you check the battery voltage? Did you check other items? So, you know, making sure that all of the items are addressed here in the workflow, there's no steps missing. And that way, when the team member completes it, they know that they've completed the process, there's no loose ends, and we're able to perform the next portion of our job. So this is a little bit more blown up of that same workflow. So again, it's a PM of a truck. So making sure to write down mileage, check the tire condition, check tire pressure, check oil. All of these things are reportable for us, which is great. So if a team member comes in and says, you know, hey, I checked no, the tires need replacement, but I needed to get done with my task. Well, now I can have a report that automatically shows how many tires need replaced or how many air filters our coordinators need to purchase for the next round of preventative maintenance, or how many belts. So again, going back to that ability to create an ad hoc report and be able to use all of these reports to make business decisions has been paramount for us. This is one workflow for facilities. We have workflows in IT, like I said, for approval of purchasing. For radio repairs, we would constantly get items dropped off to the IT build room. We'd get 12 radios dropped off, and they would claim that they dropped off 24. So now we have a workflow that both team members have to agree how many radios they dropped off. Seems silly, but those little things kind of add up to make sure that we're successful in our day-to-day workflows or our day-to-day jobs. We've also got procurement and purchasing in different areas with workflows. So again, very customizable, very expansive.
Yeah, I think it's impressive the number of workflows that you've implemented in the, you know, all of the different scenarios that you support, right? And you made a really interesting point that the departments could administer their own instances. So if they wanted to tweak a workflow or they wanted to make a change to a form, they didn't have to burden somebody with or wait on somebody in IT to do that. So, you know, we've seen no code become really important for this enterprise service management model to work well. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you talk a little bit about how important it is that the users can administer their own instance, their own applications?
Yeah, it's absolutely paramount to their success. I mean, IT has their own day job. While we are here to support the enterprise, we're also here to advance the enterprise. So, you know, if the customer or our team members are waiting on us to add one new custom attribute that's going to be outrageously beneficial, but we're tied down with projects or our day to day, it doesn't help anybody to wait on something so simple. So being able to kind of put that power back in the department's hands has been really beneficial and instrumental to their success. You know, the one thing I will say, you're correct, it's no code. I'll throw in my dad joke here. If you have somebody, and I'll age myself a little bit, that had a MySpace page back in the early 2000s, you'll be fine. I mean, that's the most it took for us, for any of our team members, was to make sure that they knew how to look at what color you wanted the button, or make sure they understood how a workflow operated. So it really is no code, but again, if you had somebody that used MySpace, you'll be fine with creating your customer portal. You'll be fine with kind of the normal operations of it. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Do you think Tom's still out there?
He didn't pay me for that endorsement, so if he is out there, I'd like some royalties somewhere. But
Oh, that's funny. So we have another poll question. So this is another time to put your participation hat on. What are the biggest obstacles that you've seen? So if you've tried this or considering it, I saw a note, somebody was starting to roll this out. What have been some of the obstacles? This is always interesting to hear about. So just take a minute, and you don't have to think too hard about it. We'll gather this information, and then we'll chat about it a little bit. Hopefully, Jonathan can share some of his experiences, and I'll try to do my best to share some of mine as well. Okay, it looks like we have pretty good participation. All right. So the number one cohort is getting buy-in from the various teams. And I think that that's very interesting. And then the last two, the second and third, are cumbersome admin and time consuming to deploy. I think the no code aspect of it and just ease of configuration, or what we call ease of ownership, is really important for that. But gaining buy-in, Jonathan, you want to talk a little bit about how you gain buy-in, some of the best practices from your lessons learned?
yeah, absolutely. We have a team here, BSAs, that kind of work with the departments and really understand their day-to-day operations, allowing them to kind of use the application first within our IT department, and then go to those team members and kind of look at their day to day, look at where we could streamline some of those processes. Again, the approval process has been instrumental to streamlining how long it takes just to do normal operations. So in our purchasing team, they weren't on a ticketing system. They would get 10 to 12 emails a day. Where's my package? Where's my order? What's going on here? I'd like to add this into our requisition system. I want to make sure that this gets done, and being able to have all that reportable and actionable versus just an email box that you're not sure if somebody replied to or if somebody's following up. And then you get an email 2 weeks later that nobody did follow up. That's helped. The ability to have metrics and KPIs. I know KPIs are big right now. Making sure that you're able to report on success metrics and making sure that you're able to report on efficiencies. All of the teams that have TDX today are using that to make business decisions about staffing, make business decisions about ensuring that our customer satisfaction is driven to the top potential. So again, it all goes back for us for reporting and being able to use that information in a more valuable way than just having a repository of ticket information without a real streamlined way of reporting against it or using that information in a beneficial way.
One of the things that we've seen, and it takes some patience, and I know that a lot of us who were in IT, may not be as patient as we'd like to be, but we had our annual user conference last week, and someone made a really good point. They said, start with the contingent of the willing. So first, if there is a department that is struggling with the technology, they have a need, they express the pain, they've seen what IT is doing, they say, hey, we think this could help us. Great place to start. Now, what we've also seen is that as those additional groups gain traction, right, that other groups start to pay notice. So they might be like, wow, okay, I see what marketing's doing. I think we might be able to benefit from that. And so over time, it can build a case. And then by the end, let's say you have a handful of departments left, sometimes people don't want to be left out. So they say, wait a minute, okay, I think we can do better. I've seen this enough. Other departments are getting benefit. We're convinced. The other thing I would say too is that it's really hard to deploy a solution that used to a specific function in a business if it uses the terminology of another function in the business. So for example, when you try to apply an IT service management tool to non-IT, let's say marketing, trying to convince somebody how to use an incident or a problem or a change when they call things something completely different, right? Like HR uses cases quite a bit. If you can make it specific to them, that helps a lot. The other thing that we've seen clients do is there's an IT liaison or owner who can quickly prototype a tool. So for example, if someone's using um, an Excel sheet for tracking their requests, get a copy of it, see what they call things, spin up a Team Dynamics application. It doesn't take very long, you know, change the name so that the title of the ticket types is exactly what they use, and just give them a vision. You know, if they squint, they could say, wow, I can see how that could really work, right? That's also something we've seen that can be beneficial there as well. So, Jonathan, we've talked about the tremendous amount of workflows that you've used for enterprise service management, but I know that change management within IT has been a big focus too. Can you talk a little bit about how you're using Team Dynamics for the IT side when it comes to change management workflow?
Yeah. So the integration for us was great. So we use Team Dynamics for change management. We've created a custom form for routine and scheduled changes. So we're able to determine those based on our normal operational procedures. It goes through, so that form asks, what's happening? What's the date and time that it's occurring? What's the status of the change? Is it an emergency or not? There's a workflow that goes to the approver to make sure, so their manager, to make sure that they understand what's going on and the manager can speak to those changes if necessary. And then it automatically makes a task to update documentation, update your CMDB, make sure that you've closed out any loose ends. And then it goes to our CAB review board, which every Monday we meet and kind of go over all of the changes for previous week. We document the successes, make sure we note anything that might have changed. And then we also talk about future changes for the week. So we're able to use a dashboard in our CAB board to show, again, completed, pending, upcoming, and those kind of items. So it's also been beneficial that it translates directly from our incident response or incident tickets. So we're able to reclassify a ticket as a problem. If there's a change associated with that problem, we can merge those two tickets so that there's an identifying ticket that resulted in a change, and make sure that it all kind of has that full story of why we implemented something or why we changed a process.
So if you think about reporting, right, you've mentioned how the CIO dashboard was really valuable. Can you comment on other ways you're using dashboarding and reporting that have been beneficial around both IT, but also enterprise service management? Because I know that's a critical component for most of the people watching this presentation.
Yep. So one of the ones we actually just created last week was a waiting on a vendor dashboard. So in IT, you have broken parts and pieces, and you might be waiting on somebody to repair, but you don't want to see that in your day-to-day tickets, your emergency tickets, or your items that you want to kind of focus on. So we created a dashboard that tracks where we are in our repair process, and it kind of takes it out of the normal day-to-day visibility, but it's still accessible and reportable. We track all of our SLAs and OLAs. So we have a commitment to our business to make sure that they have 99% uptime. And so we make sure that through tracking, we can either hold a vendor accountable if they're not meeting that metric, or report our successes. Hey, we were able to keep 99% uptime this year. We only had one outage and it took this long, because we can report that time duration as well. And we're able to give all those reports to our C-suite and say, here's your critical applications that we have. We have 124 of them currently. Here's the critical applications that we track. Here's the downtime associated with those items. What should we do to improve, or how can we improve our response time to the business? We think we're within threshold, or we think there's areas for improvement. But again, being able to produce that where we haven't been able to in the past, our C-suite loves it.
Very interesting. If we think about these technologies, and for our perspective, when we're thinking about product, I think that the way we look at it is also a way enterprise service management practitioners look at it. And the first is just rapid time to value. It shouldn't be very hard to stand up a new instance or application for an organization, right? That should not be the work. The work should be in figuring out the processes and then the training, et cetera. The actual technology shouldn't be the long pole in the tent, so to speak. And then delight everyone, right? Figure out how do we configure the solution so it's appropriate for the organizations using it without overwhelming them. And we try to make that easy. And then also trying to stay ahead. So, some of the things we're constantly thinking about is how do we make it easier to use? How can we take new technologies and, for example, new applications of AI, test them, prove them out, and then deploy them to our customers? And I think as an enterprise service management practitioner, there's a real leadership role there to be able to take some of these ideas and concepts and then bring them out to all these departments that once you master it in IT, bring those out to all those departments. And I think that there's a massive opportunity to do that, right? And one last question here is what is your current ITSM platform? And just be thinking about it. Hey, is it is it appropriate for using outside of IT as well? So just take a minute here and fill this out. Just give us an idea of where people are. Great, lots of participation. That's really good. And remember about the Q&A as well. So if you have questions based upon anything Jonathan says or anything I say or my colleague Tiffany, who I'll introduce you to shortly, says, make sure you write those down and we'll have some time at the end to discuss them. Okay, so end poll. All right, so it looks like the vast majority are Team Dynamics customers, but we have some ServiceNow, Avanti, and Freshservice as well. So we're going to go ahead and do a demonstration. And before we do that, I'm going to walk through some of the concepts at a high level. What we're really doing is taking some of the things we've talked about, Jonathan and I, and give you a visual on them. Not to say that what you see today would be perfect for your organization, right? These systems are highly configurable, but you can look at it and get the idea of what some of these concepts look like in a tool or platform. And if you're looking for a new platform or you're thinking about how can we adapt our current platform, this might give you some ideas as well. So you think about work management in general, think about all the effort that people put into activities for enterprise service management, but also project portfolio management as well. We really think that's critically important, especially with IT, but lots of departments have uh, project portfolio management needs, also self-service capabilities. So that knowledge base and service portal layered in with AI to help people self-serve and automation. I think that the combination of automation with AI, with traditional work management skills is an incredible combination and offers opportunities to make service management better for your people and your customers that haven't existed yet. And so I think it's a really great time to be part of this in our areas. So when you think about enterprise service management, again, this is how do you support those IT and non-IT departments just for general service management in ways that is important to their businesses, so their terminology, their processes, their integrations, their automations, right? AI that's specific to their group. So while IT can have their own special applications, they should be able to have them too, right? And I think that's one of the most important pieces of this. So again, you're thinking about the different areas within the business. These are some of the areas we see that are commonly using I think our most prolific enterprise service management customer has over 200 departments using Team Dynamics for their workflows and business processes, but this is kind of the core subset. So with that, I want to introduce my colleague, Tiffany Lindhart, and she is going to walk through a demonstration of the Team Dynamics platform. But remember, if you're using something else, use it as an opportunity to think about how might I configure what we own to do this, right? So Tiffany, I will stop sharing and hand it to you.
Yeah, all right. So, like we've been talking about so far, we're really going to be taking that opportunity within Team Dynamics, which works well because most of you are Team Dynamics customers, to see how we can implement some of those features at a high level that we've been discussing so far. And so some of the first things that we talked about was that importance of having that configurable front end to be able to meet your users where they are. Whether that's an all-in-one, one-stop shop approach, like what we see here, where you have pages dedicated to different teams that are leveraging the platform to provide support, or even organizing that information into categories, whether that's service or knowledge, making sure that information is available for people to find and review and for people to be able to submit those requests as well. But it can also include giving every group their own space with their own look and feel. And as we were talking about, their own power to configure this. Jonathan used that great example of MySpace. And I think building out and configuring and designing these types of views is very similar to the example that he gave. You're pulling together modules, empowering folks to design that look and feel that works best for them. And Andrew also talked about the importance of fulfilling self service through this. So, not only can I, of course, search through here to find information for help that I might need, whether it's an IT issue or maybe a facilities issue or a HR issue along the way, I can also engage that bot in a similar way too. And those bots, you can have one or many. So, like we saw on the HR portal, you might have an HR bot whose welcome message shares information that's going to be specific for HR and relevant to the things that are tied into them, maybe upcoming deadlines like open enrollment. And your IT bot here might share information about those outages that you are managing, empowering you to proactively communicate with folks before they even start asking questions here. And, in either case, if I ask a question and maybe a different bot has the answer, you can make sure that folks get tied over to the right area. And you can even empower and leverage those integrations that Andrew was mentioning earlier. So things like being able to ask, what is my PTO balance? Since I'm already signed in, it can transfer me behind the scenes to that HR bot that's then going to reach out to our ERP system and pull in that data for me and share it right here in the chat. Taking that support a step further beyond just answering questions and providing text answers and actually solving things for people, maybe taking action in a system or other things along those lines. And then, of course, a key element to the success of any ESM movement that we've been discussing is giving folks on the back end doing that work, those benefits that are going to help streamline their work and operations. And part of that can mean giving them that correct terminology that works best for them, along with empowering them to make the changes that are necessary within their instance, too. So here we can see an example of what a facilities team member might see when they log in. Although Jonathan also highlighted those benefits that can come from leveraging a mobile app for particularly those facilities or operational folks who do a lot of work out in the field. Being able to open up those work orders, have that terminology that's specific to you and your team, share the information that's relevant, and then be able to create and manage your own workflows without having to lean on IT or another team to do that. HR or other groups can have that similar look, right? Where here we're thinking about those HR projects that we're working on, maybe the tickets or the new hire processes, allowing folks to collaborate quite easily and having that same codeless drag and drop capability when we're doing things like gathering information, bringing in data through that form, and empowering again those folks to be able to make those changes on their own. But of course, it's still important not to forget our friends in IT, and some of the stuff that we talked about on the IT side of the house is using your platform to empower processes, thinking about those forms and workflows from that IT lens, like things like change management. And so here we can see an example of a change management dashboard where we might have emergency changes, or like Jonathan spoke of, having those changes categorized, having standard normal changes, having the workflows involving the cab, sharing information in a change calendar view as well. And then all of this data is, only helpful if folks can see the data that's relevant to them. So we've seen some great examples of making sure that each of those different teams has a tailored view into the data that's specific to them through their dashboard. And Jonathan mentioned the benefit as well of having things like CIO or executive level dashboards. So coming into our executive level individual here, we can see examples of how we might bring that data across different teams or units together to see how the organization as a whole is succeeding, whether that's project work or ticket work within a single pane of glass. Maybe drilling down into things like those KPIs or metrics that are going to be available for different teams, or even sharing information about how we're doing with that knowledge management. Jonathan mentioned early on how key that was to success and making sure that folks have the right information at the right time. You can even share information like we saw in our chat bot, again, empowering that proactive communication. And from the standpoint of all the different folks that might be involved, having the right information at hand is always going to be easy because of, like Andrew was mentioning, those codeless building tools available to you. You'll never have to know SQL or anything more complex in order to build out a report. All you need to know is what data you want to see in that report, along with what data you don't want to see in that report as well. So that was just a little highlight of some of the features that we have been talking about as we've gone through. I do see we have a question in the Q&A. Hopefully my demonstration answered some of that, but if not, I'll hand things back to Andrew and Jonathan for us to continue to talk and engage in more questions as well.
Great, thanks, Tiffany. Let me get my screen back sharing here. Okay, great. So I think what you saw is just sort of the flexibility of a platform that's built for enterprise service management to adapt to the needs of both IT and non-IT alike. So when we dig into it, what usually stands out to me is just some of the things that Jonathan had pointed out, right? Ease of implementation, ease of ownership, making sure that departments can do their own administration, right? A lot of our IT groups become almost consultants to the organization, where they might support the admin if they had questions about how to do something new, but those admins out in the departments are actually owning the applications as well. So remember to get your questions in. We have a question. So Jonathan's question is from Bobby. With the other departments involved with TDX, are they on different instances, or are they all in the same platform and just sort of separated by application? And then are there administrators do they each have their own administrator? And then do you report across all of them at times independently? And then is there a need for data governance? So for example, do you have to have shared field names across all the departments, or can departments have their own field names and you don't have to worry about it a whole lot? So there's a bunch of questions in there. So let me know if you forget any of them, or I just dig in.
All good questions. So we are on one entrance with a bunch of applications. So our facilities team has a ticketing application and an assets application. Our environmental services team has a ticketing application and an assets application. So we're all kind of under the same iterants or umbrella. They are administrators of their own area, so we've created security roles to make sure that they only can touch their area and nobody else's. And then given those roles to whomever they would choose to be kind of the subject matter expert in those areas. I report against all of the areas. I usually help them kind of report whenever they have questions. That's the one thing that I've really excelled at, mainly through just building a bunch of different dashboards and reports. But if they ever have any questions, they can come to me and I can kind of build it with them or for them within their own environment. So they have the capability. I think it's sometimes just a bandwidth item. They're looking for a very specific niche report, and I'm able to just kind of do that really quickly. So I guess that's that. And as far as data governance, we care. We do have some things that kind of convey across each of the applications or each of the segments, but we also allow them to customize different items. So for IT, they're not going to care too much about our on hold status waiting on a vendor, because they might not be waiting on a vendor at any point in their ticket lifecycle. So we allow them to customize the entirety of the application. The things that kind of are overarching are SLAs and OLAs, because those are really vendor driven and business driven or enterprise driven. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question or questions.
Yeah, thank you. And another question for you is, talk to us a little bit about lessons learned. If you could go back and coach, Jonathan Vorndran at the beginning of this process, what would you advise him to do differently?
Do it sooner. I mean, I know that sounds salesy, but really do it sooner. I think the applications that we had, we continued to try to make our business processes fit the applications. And this allows us to make the application fit our business process. I'm not saying we do everything well. We do everything well enough for the enterprise, but it allowed us to customize the application, allowed our team members to get more mobile and have that flexibility. So one of my answers would be do it sooner. The other answer is make sure, we took input as much as possible, but make sure to continue taking input. A lot of our teams, some do well with change and some don't. And making sure to kind of sit down with the team members that don't deal well with change and make sure that their feedback is heard and implemented is really helpful to the success of the project. So you've got to have some champions in your teams or in your departments, but also you need to make sure that everyone's input feels valued and listened to. Not everything that people suggest makes its way to our forums or templates, but things like templates, that was one of our initial concerns from some of the IT support team members was, we're asking for additional items in our tickets because we want different reportable metrics. But with that, we're able to create templates. So now you're not having to sit there and fill out 15 fields for a password reset. You're selecting a template, and all you have to put in is the customer's name and the application that was affected. So really, you're only asking for now 2 data points versus in our older system, 15 to 20.
Another question, once implemented, what does the administrative burden of Team Dynamics look like, right? So in the department, how much time is dedicated to admin, and then in IT, how much time is dedicated to administering the system?
Not too much. I mean, I think more of my time is spent selling it to other departments within the enterprise and making sure we build out, to their requirements. But really, the biggest thing that we've had to do is just change as we create a new process or as we, decide a different workflow step. The 5 to 10 minutes to put it into Sandbox, make sure it checks out properly, and then submit that change to production is the most time that we spend. So not a lot of administration, more user. I mean, we're more focused on customizing dashboards, and every team member gets to customize their own dashboard, which they love. So we're spending more time actually using the application for what it's intended versus working on configurations or trying to continue to mold it to fit our needs.
Thank you. And another question, when you're starting to build an enterprise service management app, is it useful to use your ITSM settings as a starting point, or do you feel as though it's bespoke enough for each department that you sort of start with the base and modify from there rather than using IT concepts?
I think a little of both. I mean, the IT concepts kind of help, right? You've built this application, you know what you know, and you're able to kind of customize those. Sometimes our business groups know they want a solution, but they don't know all of the intricacies to get to that solution. They want to track time that it takes to replace an air filter, but they don't realize that you could create a custom field that allows you to say, is this the last air filter you've taken? And it notifies the coordinator. So, making sure that you understand your own processes, stick to some of those, and then use that knowledge of your own platform to sell to other departments in your enterprise or your organization. So we really kind of stuck with ITSM as the focal point and then allowed the teams to kind of change or mold it to fit what they would like.
Here's another good question. How do you handle the challenge of people who are willing, right, but they're less able to understand the technology? How do you approach training them? Do you have knowledge base articles, right? How do you guide them?
Yeah, so we have a knowledge base article on how to submit a ticket, which most of the fields say, put your name here, what's the description, kind of what's going on there. So we have a knowledge base article for a lot of different things, and that's helped our team members kind of understand the process. And then we have knowledge base articles that aren't public, so they're just for our teams or for facilities or for purchasing to use to kind of navigate the system. Here's what you are looking for. Here's the steps that you should be taking. When a ticket comes in and it doesn't have these fields, here's what you need to do to make sure that it goes into the right dashboard or goes into the right report. So we have a public knowledge base, and then we have knowledge base that's only restricted to IT team members, and then facilities, or each segment has their own kind of private knowledge base for procedures and processes.
So I got some clarification on the question. The person asking was really more interested in the app admins in these departments. If somebody isn't as technically inclined, how do you find the app admins in the departments? How do you coach them, support them?
Yeah. Again, a lot of these team members were hired to do their specific job and not necessarily create an ESM platform. So really sit down with them. The online tutorials and the kind of crash course that Team Dynamics allows you to take is really beneficial. I say crash course, it's much more informative than that, but there's webinars that you can partake in. And so we had some of those team members take that training so that they really kind of understood what the capabilities of the product were, and really were able to kind of start that conversation before we even opened up the sandbox and started configuring for them. What would you like it to do? How would you like it to look? And then coach them and help them along the way. That's really why we did IT first, is so that we had that ability to say, oh, you want this, we know how to build that, versus everyone learning at the same time. It really helps to kind of become that subject matter expert in helping other team members.
Let's see here.
As far as readiness, Kelly, are you asking, were our teams ready to kind of make this transition, or do you mind clarifying that a little bit?
While she responds, we had another
Yes.
one come in to say, hey, is there a oh, yeah, she said yes, Team Dynamics readiness course.
Yep. So we sent them all, or we had all of them register in the webinars. So there's a few different courses. There's ones dedicated to iPads. There's ones dedicated to just general operational use. So we had everybody take those. That was going to be our project resource, or our departmental liaison. And that again kind of started stirring the creativeness for those departments. And then that's the broad view. And then we had our own internal kickoff for how we wanted to orchestrate these projects, how we wanted to orchestrate the implementations, and talk to those team members and really make sure we understood what they wanted from the application.
So another question, do you have a standard set of knowledge base articles to help with training, for just a generic for each department, or do you have, specialty articles for the different departments when it comes to standing up a new application or training those admins? What do you leverage?
We have a standard set as well as a more specific set, because again, we have ITSM specific items. So if we ask purchasing to use our priority matrix, they're not really going to follow the same suit. Their priority is going to be much different than the CEO's printers out of ink. So we have general ones, and then we have very specific ones that are relative to the forms that we create for those departments. So we work with them and ask all of the team members in those departments, from manager down to coordinator, what would you like us to document and how would you like to see that? So for some of those team members, it's videos. We have video walkthroughs that we host on Team Dynamics, and some of them it's a PDF that's just step-by-step with pictures. You have to make sure you understand how people learn. Everyone has a different way of absorbing information, and making sure that you kind of hit all of those areas will be paramount to your success.
Jonathan, it looks like we've come to the end of the questions. I want to thank you so much for your participation. I think what you've done with Casino Arizona has been amazing. And I feel really confident that everyone walked away with something today to help them think. So thank you. And thank you, Tiffany. And also, if you have additional questions or want to find out more and you're not a Team Dynamics customer, you can go to teamdynamics.com. That was with an IX. And reach out to us that way. If you had questions about anything here and you are a Team Dynamics customer, reach out to your customer success manager and they can make sure you get answers. So Jonathan, thank you so much, and everyone have a great day.